The internet is furious that GTA 6 runs at 30 frames per second on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And honestly, I understand why. We're in a new console generation where many players expect every major release to hit 60 FPS. Social media is full of complaints, Reddit is calling it unacceptable, and countless videos are criticizing Rockstar for making what many see as an outdated decision. But after spending time looking into the technical side of GTA 6, I've come to a very different conclusion. I genuinely believe Rockstar made the right choice. Not because I'm defending them blindly, but because when you look at the hardware limitations, Rockstar's design philosophy, and what this game is actually trying to achieve, the decision starts making much more sense. Before you disagree, hear me out. This isn't about saying that 30 FPS is better than 60 FPS. In many games, especially competitive shooters and racing games, higher frame rates absolutely improve the experience. But GTA 6 isn't built around competitive gameplay. Rockstar is creating an incredibly detailed open world that aims to feel alive in ways we've never seen before. Every feature inside that world competes for the same hardware resources, and developers have to decide where those resources should be spent. They can't simply have everything at maximum quality. That's the reality most people ignore. Consoles have fixed hardware with limited CPU and GPU power. Every visual effect, every AI calculation, every physics simulation, every shadow, reflection, and environmental interaction uses part of that performance budget. Increasing the frame rate from 30 to 60 means the hardware has to render the entire game twice as often every second. That leaves far less processing power for everything else that makes GTA feel immersive. Rockstar had two realistic options. The first was targeting 60 FPS while reducing visual quality, world density, physics systems, lighting, and AI complexity. The second was targeting a stable 30 FPS while pushing every other part of the game to its maximum potential. Based on everything we've seen so far, Rockstar clearly chose the second option, and honestly, that choice fits their history perfectly. Rockstar has never been the studio that chases technical trends simply because everyone else is doing it. Instead, they focus on creating believable worlds, where every detail contributes to immersion. If you've played Red Dead Redemption 2, you already know exactly what I mean. That game also launched at 30 FPS on consoles, yet it became one of the highest rated games ever made because players remembered its incredible world, not its frame rate. Now look at what GTA 6 is actually trying to accomplish. According to the official trailers and technical analysis from Digital Foundry, Rockstar is pushing an enormous number of advanced systems simultaneously. The game appears to use ray-traced global illumination across the open world, allowing realistic lighting that reacts naturally to weather, time of day, reflections, and materials. Instead of relying on traditional lighting tricks, the world behaves much closer to real life. Water is another major example. It isn't simply animated with basic textures anymore. The trailers show realistic waves, foam, wakes behind boats, and complex reflections that change depending on lighting conditions. All of those calculations require significant GPU power. Then there's environmental detail. Clothing reacts naturally to movement. Trees and vegetation respond to wind and weather. Glass reflects surrounding objects more accurately. Buildings appear to have much greater geometric detail than previous Rockstar games, while the draw distance allows players to see huge portions of Vice City without obvious visual pop-in. But graphics are only half of the story. The real challenge comes from CPU performance. Every NPC inside GTA 6 appears to be doing far more than simply walking around predefined paths. We've already seen pedestrians recording crimes on their phones, reacting differently to dangerous situations, interacting with each other, responding to weather, and behaving like individuals rather than simple background characters. Each one of those behaviors requires additional CPU calculations. The more intelligent the NPCs become, the more processing power the game needs every single frame. If Rockstar doubled the frame rate to 60 FPS, the CPU would suddenly have half the available time to process all of those systems before rendering the next frame. Something would inevitably have to be sacrificed. Either fewer NPCs would appear on screen, their AI would become less sophisticated, environmental interactions would be simplified, or visual fidelity would take a noticeable hit. And that's exactly the trade-off Rockstar decided to avoid. Instead of making the world smoother, they chose to make it richer. This decision becomes even more understandable when you compare GTA 6 to other modern open-world games. Many titles offer performance modes that run at 60 FPS, but they often reduce crowd density, lower shadow quality, shorten draw distances, disable ray tracing, or simplify environmental detail to achieve that target. Rockstar appears unwilling to make those compromises because their priority has always been immersion above everything else. When players remember a Rockstar game years later, they rarely talk about frame rate, they talk about memorable moments inside the world itself. They remember discovering hidden locations, watching dynamic weather roll across the landscape, encountering random NPC events, or simply standing still and admiring how believable everything feels. That emotional connection doesn't come from frame rate alone. It comes from building a world that constantly surprises the player and feels convincing every time they explore something new. Of course, no decision like this is perfect, and there are valid criticisms that deserve attention. The biggest one is responsiveness. A game running at 60 FPS generally feels smoother and more immediate because player inputs are reflected on screen much faster. Anyone who prefers free aiming instead of relying on aim assist will probably notice the difference. That's a completely fair criticism, and no technical explanation changes that reality. Another concern is accessibility. Some players are genuinely sensitive to lower frame rates or heavy motion blur, especially during long gameplay sessions. Hopefully, Rockstar includes options to disable motion blur and adjust camera settings so players can make the experience more comfortable. Those features matter regardless of the final frame rate. Then there's the argument that we're no longer in 2013. Modern consoles are far more powerful than previous generations, so many players naturally expect every major release to reach 60 FPS. That expectation isn't unreasonable. The difference is that game ambition has increased just as quickly as hardware has improved. Developers aren't building the same games they were creating 10 years ago. They're building worlds that are dramatically larger, denser, and far more complex than anything previous console generations could handle. Another question people ask is simple: why not just include both a quality mode and a performance mode and let players choose? It's a reasonable idea, and many developers do exactly that. The challenge is that supporting two completely different performance targets often forces developers to split optimization efforts between both modes. Neither version ends up being fully optimized because every visual feature, every mission, every scripted event, and every gameplay system has to work under two different performance profiles. Rockstar has traditionally preferred building one highly polished experience instead of dividing development resources across multiple compromises. Whether you agree with that philosophy is entirely your choice, but it has been consistent throughout Rockstar's history. This also brings up a larger question about what actually makes an open-world game memorable. Frame rate certainly contributes to the experience, but it's only one part of a much bigger picture. Games like Grand Theft Auto are built around exploration, storytelling, atmosphere, random encounters, environmental interaction, and discovering unexpected moments. Those elements depend far more on simulation quality than they do on maximum frame rate. Think about your favorite memories from previous Rockstar games. Chances are you don't remember how many frames per second they were running. You remember escaping police through narrow streets, watching incredible sunsets across the map, stumbling into random events, or simply driving around because the world felt alive. Those experiences stayed with players because Rockstar invested heavily in immersion. That's exactly what GTA 6 appears to be doing again. Looking at Rockstar's history, this pattern repeats itself every single time. Before release, people criticize technical decisions, question design choices, and predict disappointment. Then launch arrives. Players actually experience the game, and the conversation shifts almost entirely toward the quality of the world Rockstar created. Red Dead Redemption 2 followed that exact pattern. Initial discussions included criticism of its slower gameplay and 30 FPS presentation. Once players spent time inside its world, those complaints became far less important than the incredible level of detail, storytelling, and environmental realism that defined the experience. There's every reason to believe GTA 6 could follow a similar path. If Rockstar successfully delivers a city that feels genuinely alive, filled with intelligent NPCs, realistic lighting, believable weather systems, dynamic environments, and countless unscripted interactions, most players will likely adapt to the frame rate far more quickly than they expect. Human perception is remarkably flexible. During the first few minutes, 30 FPS may feel noticeably different, especially for players accustomed to higher frame rates. After several hours of gameplay, however, most players naturally adjust, and their attention shifts away from technical metrics toward the experience itself. Ultimately, that's what Rockstar seems to be counting on. They aren't asking players to ignore performance. They're asking players to value immersion over absolute smoothness on fixed console hardware. Whether that trade-off feels worthwhile depends entirely on what each individual values most in a game. If your highest priority is competitive responsiveness and maximum frame rate, waiting for the PC version is probably the better choice. Rockstar has consistently supported higher frame rates on PC, allowing players with powerful hardware to experience both visual fidelity and smoother gameplay. For console players, though, the situation is different. Fixed hardware always requires compromises, and every developer must decide where those compromises should be made. Rockstar has decided to spend its performance budget on world simulation instead of doubling the frame rate. After looking at everything we've discussed, I honestly believe that decision aligns perfectly with the kind of experience GTA 6 is trying to deliver. This isn't a technical failure. It isn't laziness, poor optimization, or outdated development. It's a deliberate design decision based on priorities. Rockstar believes that realistic lighting, dense cities, advanced AI, complex physics, detailed environments, and immersive world simulation will matter more to players over hundreds of hours than smoother camera movement alone. Whether history proves them right remains to be seen, but if Rockstar's previous games are any indication, they understand exactly what makes their worlds unforgettable. So now I'd like to hear your opinion. If you had to choose only one option, which would it be? A less detailed version of Vice City running at 60 FPS, or the most immersive and believable open world Rockstar has ever created, running at a stable 30 FPS? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and keep the discussion respectful because this is one of the biggest debates surrounding GTA 6. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more evidence-based breakdowns instead of clickbait, consider subscribing. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at GTA 6's NPC AI system and explore why it may be the biggest technological leap Rockstar has ever made.